Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to the next in the webinar series for Your Best Just Got Better Online. Jason Womack here, delighted to be sharing some of this with you here live. I'm actually recording this and we're doing it live for those that called in. This is almost the end of April. We've got just hours to go here on the East Coast before we hit May. And I don't know about anybody else, but it seems like the year is going by pretty quickly. So wanted to share a couple of things from parts 1 and 2 of the book. So that would be chapters 1 through all the way to 7. And my idea here was just to give you a couple of things to think about as you move forward in implementing all of those ideas that you've probably come up with. You know, one of the things that keeps coming forward is that people are saying that reading the book, they are getting more to do than they thought they had to do. And it's one of those things where when you read any kind of personal development, professional development, there's a real opportunity there to stop reading. And I know that sounds backwards, but I got an email today from one of my mentors, a guy named Seth Godin, who has written multiple books, and he actually said today in his email, he said, you know, he gets ideas from books all the time, often in the first 20, 30, or even 40 pages. And so as you go through this, one of the big earmark topics is this concept of time. And I tell you, just today, I met with 4 clients here in New York City. Each one, we had a 2-hour conversation. That was what the schedule was like. So I went from 8 to 10 o'clock. I went from 10:30 to 12:30. I went from 1:30 to 3:30 through the entire day. And with all 4 people that I talked to today, this seemed to be a big topic. This idea that our time is limited. Now, first of all, we all knew that. But I don't think they were aware of just how limited it was. Let me give you a specific example. One of the women that I sat down and chatted with for a little bit said that the hour and a half before I arrived in the office, she had a meeting get canceled unexpectedly, and she doesn't know where those 90 minutes went. You know, it was like she had a plan, she was moving through the day, she was getting ready to go to her meeting, it got canceled, and the next thing she knew, I was waiting to meet with her, and that was a 90-minute block. So the activity that I'm recommending all my clients at least consider, and you read about this, you may have even done it, but it's to get those 96 3x5 note cards or post-it pages and literally script out for yourself what is a typical day like in your life. What are the 96 15-minute activities that you know you're going to engage in? And start with the big chunks. So start with sleep. If you're going to sleep for 8 hours a night, then we need to subtract, and you're now down to 64 15-minute blocks. Boom, it just went like that. Now, by the way, some of you watching or listening to this, you're thinking to yourself, 8 hours a night? Jason, I'm lucky if I'm getting 4 or 5. So then what we need to take a look at is really taking that ownership and deciding for myself, what would my best look like? And how do I make that a little bit better? And so the 3 things that are really important here are stepping back and identifying your own preferences, whether those are learning preferences, communication preferences, workflow preferences. And one of the things that we talk about in the book is the separation between nouns and verbs and those 2 different kinds of thinking that we can do. The activity at my best when. And I've talked about this, I'll continue to talk about it. I'm seeing this over and over again really shift the way that people are looking at their overall engagement and the way they dive into and then go through the day. And there's a website, that atmybestwhen.com, where you can listen to a recorded message, you can watch a video, and you can really dive into identifying the recipe. I call it a recipe, right? The ingredients behind being able to step up to that next level. And then, you know, as far as the digital stuff that's out there, I really am supporting people who are going back through their sent emails, their written notes, even their text messages on their phone. And what you're going to find is when you go through those inventories of people and topics, so for example, through your voicemail or your outgoing messages, your text messages. You're going to find out who you're messaging the most. Is there anything that you need to connect in with them on? Is there anything that you want to shift as far as how you are working together toward that next level of engagement? When it comes to habits and behaviors, one of the things, this was a topic that came up again today in the coaching. Another client was saying, Jason, I just need to be disciplined in order to. And I stopped her. I said, I actually think you are extremely disciplined. You are a disciple of what you're already doing. In fact, you are so disciplined that you don't even think about, and then fill in the blank, right? She didn't have to think about checking her BlackBerry. She didn't have to think about checking her email. She didn't have to think about leaving her desk. And she always has that notepad and pen that she walks around with. Those are her disciplines. So what we talked about, instead of thinking about that negative outside-in discipline of making a change, we just started experimenting with new practices, experimenting with new small behaviors. Now, this topic of how long it takes to build something into a habit, I dive into that in detail in Chapter 10 of Your Best Just Got Better. But I introduced this early on because I found it so significant, so important for people. That is, when they stop and try something out with intention, with attention, and those are the two shins that we talk about, right? Intention, that's all about what I mean to do. My intention, that's when I'm in the car, I'm driving to the office, and I start thinking to myself, here are the things, and I start making that mental to-do list, right? Here are the things that I'm going to do today. That's my intention. I can sit down at my desk, I can pull out a piece of paper or a Post-it, or I can start sending emails to myself, whatever it is that I know I need to do or need to engage in, all of that falls on the intention side of the equation. On the other side is attention. And attention is, at the end of the day, when I look back on that day, I simply ask myself, what got my focus? What got done? What got attended to? Now, if there's any delta between intention and attention, it usually comes because people's thoughts about how good or how much different or how much better they should be. And I'm going to say, hey, let's take the should out. Let's not should on ourselves today. Let's actually move into what's something that I can practice that's small, but I can actually envision myself doing that day after day after day after day after day, and then stop. And then look back and ask, how is this working for me? This question of right now, this question about being present. And if you wanted a takeaway activity from this short webinar, when you're in a meeting tomorrow or when you're in a discussion tonight over the dinner table, just remind yourself to come back to the present. Come back to some level of focus, some level of engagement. Oftentimes when I'm in a conversation with someone, and I did this at the end of the day because as a morning person, once I get to that 2:45, 3:45, my last meeting of the day today was supposed to end at 5:45 p.m. Now, I've already been going since about 5:30 this morning. So what I did is, while I was in conversation with my client, there were several times during that conversation where I let a pause show up in the conversation. So she would say something, and I would wait. 2 times in that 2-hour conversation when I waited, and it was just beyond that. When you are in a conversation with someone and you don't say anything, you both are quiet, and it starts to feel just a little weird. I never have known what you call that, by the way. Anyway, it got just to that point where, and then she started talking again. Well, because I left the room there, because I left a pause there, because I left space, when she continued talking, she actually unraveled and figured out what the prompt was that she had originally started with. So this question, what can I do right now, is one that I encourage everyone to keep on thinking about, to keep on considering. It pulls me back to the present. It shows me out in front of me what my resources are, and then I can move into that next level, that next piece of everything. Use about 15 minutes a day to make your best better. And one thing that I'll ask you to think about are the things that you could do not to be productive in 15 minutes of time, but to make you better in 15 minutes of time. Now, again, just as a reminder, people who ask me, Jason, why are you hung up on this 15-minute thing? And I've got two reasons. Reason number one is 15 minutes, I'll find those. I'll get somewhere early, someone will be running late, I'll end something earlier than I thought I was going to. I'll have a meeting get canceled suddenly. For me, flying a lot around the world, around the country, there are times where I'm circling over the airport because we can't land yet. Maybe there's traffic on the ground or they need to do something about the ice on the ground. I'll find 15 minutes on a regular basis. The other reason that 15 minutes is so important is because I can actually get something done. You can too. I've actually made an inventory of the kinds of things that I can do in 15 minutes. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I'll just give you a couple. I can write 2 thank you cards in 15 minutes. I can run just over 2 miles in 15 minutes. I can draft the conclusion to an article in about 15 minutes. Oh, by the way, quick tip for those of you who are doing any kind of writing as part of your work or your world, or even if it's something you're doing off to the side for fun, I found that if I write the conclusion first to the article that I'm writing, it actually dictates, by writing the conclusion, it dictates what kinds of examples I need, who I need to interview, and the 2 or 4 main points that I'm going to make in the article. So that's just a little tip that I can give you. 15 minutes to make your best better. Something that you could definitely do to start this is, again, instead of just getting busy and diving into productivity, you could move off to the side and write down the kinds of things that you're interested in moving on today that would make things around you better, that would improve things. This activity here is actually a combination of 2 coaching events that I've had in my life. The one came from my dad, and the other came from a good friend of mine, Allison Lewis. And one of the things that my dad taught me years ago, there was a period in time where he was working in Long Beach and I was working in Seal Beach. He was running a company on that side of the freeway, and then I was working with the U.S. Navy down at Seal Beach. And there were several times where I went to work and I actually wound up staying with him. So I would go to work, he would go to work. We'd come back together for dinner. We'd have a conversation about how our day went. Now remember, I'm going and I'm advising workflow units over at the U.S. Navy. He's going and he's running a multi-million-dollar furniture store, a furniture company. Well, what was fascinating was when we came together, I realized that there was this mentoring going on. There was this teaching going on between the 2 of us. And one thing that he taught me was the question that he ends every day with is, did I make today any better? And then he told me when he starts his day, when he's shaving, looking in the mirror, getting ready for the day, the question he asks himself when he starts the day, how can I make today better? So you see, it's a closed gap system. At the beginning of the day, what can I do to make today better? At the end of the day, what did I do today to make today better? And he said it was a real reframe on what he was focused on. Now that was coaching I got from my dad. Over on the other side, a woman named Allison Lewis has written several books. One of them is called The 7-Minute Difference. And in this book, she goes into detail about one time she was attending a seminar, and during the presentation, the facilitator had everyone in the room take 15 minutes to write down what their goals were, what their areas of focus were. Well, the story goes that as the clock was ticking and as Allison was waiting and waiting for the class to be over so she could get back to work, she said she had an epiphany. She looked up, she looked at the clock, and 8 minutes had gone by. Half of her time was gone. She said she turned to the piece of paper, grabbed the pen, and she wrote for the next 7 minutes. One of the things that she talks about in her book, The 7-Minute Difference, is to make a list of what she calls 5 by 11. And they are the things that you intend to do by 11 a.m. every day. Now this works fantastic for my morning people, my morning clients. Those of you who wake up in the morning and you're ready for the day. For those of you who kick into gear later in the afternoon, maybe you amend this a little bit for yourself. And for you, it's a little bit later in the day, right? So what am I going to have done by 4:30 this afternoon? Either way, really identify for yourself what working smarter would look like to you and the things that you can do to get in there and make your best a little bit better. Okay, I want to go through a couple of things here on the second part of the book, and then we're going to stop the presentation and I'm going to open it up to questions. So the second part of the book, you know, has 4 chapters in it, and it's a thick section. What I'm going for here is sharing with you as many things as I can about what it means, what it takes to think a little bit bigger. Now, each person is going to have their own vision of what that looks like. In Chapter 4, I go into great detail about the concept of self-efficacy. Now, this is something that I learned from a teacher of mine, Lou Tice, out of Seattle, Washington. And I had been recommended to go to one of Lou's classes, and it took me a few years to put it on the schedule, to get everything to work out. Jody and I went up to Seattle for a few days, and we attended this 2-day conference. And in those 2 days, I got several takeaways. One of them was this concept that self-efficacy, although it may be innate, although it may be born, it actually can be developed. And what I did is I left that conference, I came back to California, and I spent the next about 12 years, here I am 12 years later, I spent the next 12 years identifying the things that I could do to build my own self-efficacy, my own belief in that things could happen. Now, by the way, I need to share with you, this is nothing new to me. I mean, when I was a kid, my mom tells me my favorite children's story was that little engine that could. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And apparently, when I was a kid, I used to do the chant with my mom, right? I think I can, I think I can. So nowadays, now that I'm a little bit older and I've got a little bit more responsibility, I'm looking around and studying what can we do to build that self-efficacy, that belief that things are possible. And I've got 3 things for you to consider. The first one is to show up. And I mean more than simply arriving when I say this. So there are different things that I want to make sure I show up prepared, I show up ready to engage, I show up genuine, I show up full of integrity. I show up with the things that I said I was going to show up with. You know, here in New York City, all last week, Monday through Friday, I ran programs and seminars for clients. And then this week, I'm working one-on-one with some of those very same clients who were in my classes. And the fascinating thing is I continue arriving at the time I said I was going to arrive. I'm bringing the materials I said I was going to bring. One of the things that's fascinating is when I am working with someone one-on-one and I follow up with them within 12 to 24 hours. Already I've been getting emails over the past week from people saying, you know, Jason, thank you so much. I know you're traveling, I know you're on the road, I know you're working every day. I really appreciate you following up and doing what you said you would do. And it's just fascinating how far that goes. The second thing here is to do good work. And doing good work, it's not a one-way street. You know, it's really stopping and looking out at that person that I'm working across from, or listening to that person that I'm talking to on the telephone and hearing her or him and really working to meet them where they are and grow from there. I observe a lot of conversations, and one of the things that I do for clients is I come in and I sit in the back of the room, but I sit in on meetings and I just watch the dynamics of what's going on. And unfortunately, one of the things that I need to bring to my clients, and almost the bearer of bad news here, but there are actually things that people do while they're in meetings that almost erode at the overall efficacy of getting that group together. So when we talk about doing good work, you may just want to pull out a piece of paper and a pen off to the side of your desk while you're watching this or later on today and just write down for yourself what it would look like if things were going well, what your best work would look like, what you running an effective meeting would look like, what you having a great phone call with a client would look like. And then the third one, and this is a huge builder of self-efficacy because there is an occasional return on this investment. I say here to stay in touch. And there's so many different ways these days, right? With text messaging, with all of the social media that's available, with phone calls, with handwritten letters. And if you think about it, If you consider the last time that you received a handwritten note in the mail, something came to you and you physically held that in your hand, it might have meant something to you. It might have been special. It might have been different. I know when I receive cards, greeting cards from people who've actually stopped, taken their time, put pen to paper, put thought to page, I'm touched. I'm amazed that in the day and age that we're in, A, that it's still easy to do that, but B, when people do, it just goes so far in moving that forward. Now, how this builds self-efficacy, I've got two different reasons. Number one, occasionally when I write a letter to somebody, I get a reply back. They say, hey, Jason, that was great, made my day, really thought, thank you so much. But really, just the fact of pausing long enough to script out 60 or 100 or 200 words, just that process of steeping in acknowledgement and really focusing on what's important, for me, has been great. Now, the next chapter in the book is chapter 6 that I want to talk about here. And chapter 6 is actually a big chapter. It's all about tracking. And for a lot of people who grew up in sports or did any kind of habit or behavior building activities as kids or later on in school, tracking is a ton of work, but oh my goodness, is it valuable. And so I offer in the book a couple of things that you could track. Just out of the gate, what I might want to do is track what's called my so that. And the way that we do this is to look back at your MITs, your most important things, and if you get that written down, so you might have 4, 5, or 6 MITs in your personal life, 4, 5, or 6 MITs in your professional life. If you write all of those down on the left-hand side of a piece of paper, and then to the right of each one of those, and by the way, leave a little bit of space in between so you can write a paragraph or so. But let's say on that piece of paper, I wrote down that being a public speaker is one of my MITs. So getting out in the world and doing the keynote presentations and talking to audiences around the world and bringing information that they could use tomorrow to make their best better. If that's one of my MITs, off to the right-hand side of that, I want to give myself a good paragraph, maybe even 2 paragraphs, about why. And instead of writing down the mission statement or the vision statement, what I'm having clients do is answer this prompt. All right? I am a public speaker so that. And then what you do is you go through this process 7, 9, 12, maybe 15 times. And you get that so that so clear that ultimately it becomes almost a magnet toward productivity. As you go through the book, you're going to find over and over again, I talk about working together, I talk about the social network, I talk about mentors. And truly, if you want to go far fast, get someone to push you from behind. I saw a great TED Talk from Richard St. John, and he did a 3.5-minute TED Talk, totally valuable. Just go over to TED.com and type in Richard St. John. And he talked about the things that lead to success. He said he interviewed people from around the world. He did over 700 interviews of sitting down with people and listening to their stories. What leads to success? And over again, one of the things that he found, one of the things that people shared with him was that they got people on their side. They got people to push them along the way. So those are the couple of things that I wanted to share at this point on Your Best Just Got Better. I'm going to go ahead and stop this webinar. Thank you for tuning in. And then I'm going to open it up to a dialogue. We have about a half an hour left for any kinds of conversation or updates. And again, I really appreciate you attending. If you have any questions on all of this, you can pop over to the website, womackcompany.com. And of course, if you're in the community, the Your Best Just Got Better online community, go ahead and leave a prompt in the discussion forum or maybe connect with one of your fellow colleagues as you move through this book and make your best even better.